And notice Ananias' response when the words of Ananias is, I want you to take care of this man. What is Ananias' response?
He says, I've heard of this man. He's the one that's done, I've heard evil reports.
Yeah, in our day it'd be, are you kidding me? Do you know who this is? Have you heard the story of this man?
And he knew he had authority to bind any who believed.
That's correct. What does the Lord say? And I think this is one of the great verses in the New Testament, verse 15. But the Lord said unto him, Ananias, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me. That's a great message. What's he going to do? To bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel.
And by the way, any pain he ever caused the Christian community, he'll feel the effects of himself. He'll be more persecuted than any, almost killed several times. I have a question. Why would it use the phrase chosen vessel? There doesn't seem to be anything to indicate that Paul
had ever done anything
to be, had a reason to be chosen. It seems to me it's an obvious reference to a premortal choosing.
This is a man I've got my eye upon. Clearly, Paul was foreordained to do great things. I don't think any of us has any question about the fact that he's terribly devout in what he had been doing. I think he felt he'd been serving God in the best way he could.
Just needed to be turned in the right direction.
He needed to be turned 180 degrees, that's all.
Well, Elder McConkie refers to him as a man with zeal, but not truth.
That's
and now he gets the truth, and you couple that with the zeal, you've got a powerful missionary.
Brother Matthews?
Yeah, I'm glad we took that turn, because Paul was not a bad man.
No.
His life was circumspect. He just was on the wrong path, and the Lord had to get his attention. So President McKay's observation, he probably was touched by Stephen, even though he may not have responded to it immediately.
Let's say something about let's put all this together in this sense. He has his conversion. We won't turn to it now, but in the Epistle to the Galatians, we get a detail or two more about those early days and weeks and months and even years. He has his conversion. He goes to Arabia for an extended period of time. Why go to Arabia?
It's an MTC experience.
How so?
He's got to have a change of heart. He's got to be ready. He's got to leave the world he's known and focus totally now on the new call that's come to him.
And there's a part of that. Think about this. It's as if I now have to go and reread the Old Testament with new eyes. Yeah. It's a whole new world to him now.
How many of our missionaries have the same experience? Many may have grown up members of the church and been so surrounded by the things of the gospel, but now the thought that they're going to have to teach it to someone else causes them to go back and start looking at the scriptures and the gospel through a whole new set of eyes, a whole new experience.
How could Philip take Isaiah 53 and teach it so powerfully to this eunuch that he's converted? It's because he could see Christ in the Old Testament. He knew that wasn't Isaiah 53. And now I agree with what Brother Millett said. This is a paradigm shift. Paul now has got to look back at the Old Testament. This enormous amount of knowledge that he's gained over the years, and he's got to see Christ through page after page after page. And he does.
We might look at verse 15. But the Lord said unto him, meaning to Ananias, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me. We made that point. But to bear my name before the Gentiles, there's an introduction right there that Paul's mission would be, and kings. And that has to mean kings of the Gentiles, as well as kings of Israel, and the children of Israel. He's going to be one who hobnobs and testifies and spends his time testifying to very high echelons of people.
And notice when God raises him up. This is before Peter's vision of the gospel going to the Gentiles, but now we're getting revelations that there are individuals being prepared for that great revelation that will come.
That's correct.
The vision that Peter's going to see is about to happen. In the meantime, the Lord has Paul prepared and waiting in the wings.
He's putting people in place.
And don't you believe that happens in our day? That
Oh,
when the gospel's
absolutely.
about ready to move into an area, there will be people raised up by the Lord, and by the time the gospel moves into an area, there are hearts already prepared that missionaries can find.
Well, it certainly was the case in England.
Absolutely.
It was the case in Africa.
Right.
People were ready to go.
Russia.
This is why we ought to be reading the New Testament. This is the justification for those of us who belong to the church now and have living prophets now, why we ought to spend time reading the ancient scriptures. And that is, the pattern is laid before us so beautifully in the book of Acts. What the book of Acts really is the missionary outreach of the church.
Yes.
And, we need to think seriously with all that everybody has to do in the church now. Why should we spend time reading what was done anciently? It has been demonstrated over and over again that people who are acquainted with the older scriptures are more likely to follow the living prophets. Mm-hmm. And so there's great justification to all of us to understand these very principles that we're reading.
So he is converted. He spends time in Arabia. He preaches in Damascus. And after 3 years, as Galatians says, he goes back finally and meets with the leadership of the church. We'll reserve that for a future discussion.
And even after having seen the Lord personally, he still had to be baptized
That is
and
correct.
had hands laid on his head. I'd like to just briefly comment on that. I think we can rightly understand that if Paul had not repented and had not been baptized, even though he had seen the Lord, in time to come, he'd wonder whether that really happened.
Yeah.
Paul had to keep the commandments. He had to obey the ordinances so that his spirit might be constantly refreshed by the Holy Spirit.
That's right. Think of the Book of Mormon analogy. Alma and his colleagues are knocked to the ground by an angel. But thereafter, whenever Alma bears testimony, and he says how he knows what he knows, he never says, I know this because an angel knocked me to the ground. He said, I know it because I have fasted and prayed many days, and these things have been made known unto me by the Holy Spirit of God.
So what we're saying then is, in addition to studying the scriptures, the eunuch, in addition to feeling the promptings of the Spirit, there also has to be the commitment with ordinances.
Joseph Smith's words, which are so wonderful, being born again comes by the Spirit of God through ordinances.